I've always remembered silence more vividly than sound. The way it settles into a room not like peace, but like something forgotten. There was a box on Nate's desk, unsealed. Heavy cream paper, gold ink, the kind of invitation that tells people how expensive your marriage looks from the outside. Inside, 30 envelopes. I skimmed the names like I was reading a guest list for someone else's wedding. Mine wasn't there. The folder beside it held catering notes, wine pairings, seating charts, a hand-scribbled note in Nate's writing. Move Shelley closer to Richard. Keep Liz's table out of camera frame. I didn't know which part stunned me more, the erasure or the precision of it. My phone buzzed once, a text from Shelley Liz. I thought you weren't coming. I didn't answer. There wasn't a question in her message, just relief, dressed up as confusion. I walked into the kitchen and opened the freezer. Tucked behind old soup stock and ice trays was the top tier of our wedding cake. Still wrapped in foil, still marked, save for year 10. I didn't cry. I sat down at the counter and placed the small box of invitations next to a chipped mug from college. I don't know why I kept that mug all these years. It still has the faint stain of coffee around the rim no matter how many times I scrub it. Another buzz, a message from Susan. Best not to come. 3 words, no greeting, no signature, not even punctuation. There was something so final about it. Not dramatic, not cruel. Just final. I stayed at the counter a long time. My hand rested near the invitation box, but I didn't touch it again. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied, casting everything in that cold, surgical white. The wedding photo above the sink had started to curl at the edges. I didn't take it down. I just stopped looking. Later, as I rinsed the mug, I noticed my ring had left a faint line on the soap-damp countertop. It disappeared when I wiped it, as if it had never been there. That night, I didn't ask Nate about the party. I didn't call anyone. I didn't bring it up. Because somewhere in the pause between Shelley's message and Susan's text, I realized something that didn't need words. I had already been removed. They had just forgotten to tell me. I used to believe that if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, agreeable enough, I would belong. There was a navy dress in the back of my closet, 3/4 sleeves, pearl buttons, just the way Susan preferred. I wore it every Thanksgiving. She never commented, but I noticed she didn't look away as quickly when I poured the wine. Haley once handed me a draft of Nate's annual speech half finished and said, "It'll sound more credible if we soften the tone. More domestic." I rewrote the whole thing by morning. My name was never attached. At board dinners, I learned to nod when Nate spoke, even when the figures were ones I had calculated. When someone once referred to me as the decorative arm, I smiled. The waiter dropped his tray. That was the only sound of protest that night. When my father died, there was no pause in the calendar. Meetings resumed the next day. Susan had leaned over my chair with a clipboard and said, "We can't afford sentimentality. The company needs forward motion." I remember signing a condolence letter to myself, corporate stationery, Nate's name at the bottom. Nothing handwritten. In one strategy meeting, Nate laid out a multi-phase plan I had drafted. Word for word. I sat 2 chairs away. No one looked in my direction. Haley crossed her legs, leaned back, and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "She's really learned to stay in her lane." Later that week, Tom Beckett found me by the elevator. He didn't smile, didn't pretend. "You know they don't see you right." I folded the hem of my sleeve between my fingers. I thought I was one of them. I once thought harmony meant withholding opinion, muting, color, reducing presence, that, if I just agreed long enough, someone would say, "She belongs here." No one ever did. There's a drawer in Nate's office labeled Shared Ideas. I once placed a note in there, an expansion pitch I had worked on for weeks. It disappeared the next day. A week later, I heard Susan remark, "It's impressive how much Haley understands our long-term vision." I didn't correct her. I watched her cross the room in heels that didn't make a sound. It's always the quiet ones who draw blood cleanly. There's a coat in my closet that still smells like cedar and dry cold. The lining's torn where the tag used to be. I kept wearing it anyway, because I thought if I stitched myself into their world gently enough, they wouldn't notice I didn't match. Turns out, they never even looked. Sometimes, absence carves deeper than presence ever could. The Christmas card from 2020 arrived in a thick, glossy envelope. The photo was taken in front of the fireplace, Nate, in his grey sweater, Emily holding a candy cane, Susan on one end, Haley on the other. My name was missing from the printed signature line. Underneath it read, "From our family to yours." No one mentioned it. No one needed to. At a fundraising gala that spring, I received a plaque for community contributions. It was quiet brief, something I hadn't expected. As I returned to the table, Nate barely looked up from his phone. Haley raised her glass. "Media suits her," she said, tilting toward him. "Smart women do better off stage," he replied. I had worn a satin blouse that night, a gift from my father. The cuff button was chipped. I ran my thumb over it during dessert, tracing the edge until it left a faint mark on my skin. On Emily's 5th birthday, Susan hosted a garden party at her house in Ridgefield. I offered to help with the guest list, but she waved a hand and said, "Don't complicate it. I've already handled the important names." The printed program at the table listed Susan as the host, Nate as the father, Haley as the event coordinator. There was no mention of me. Emily sat on a swing laughing as petals fell around her. I stood near the fence. A woman I didn't know leaned over and whispered to her friend, "She must be the nanny." There's a photograph framed in silver one I used to keep near the entryway. Emily is scented cheeks flushed between Nate and Susan. I'm in the frame barely, my shoulder half visible behind a vase of lilies. I took it down one afternoon and slid it into a drawer. Not out of anger. It just felt dishonest to keep pretending I was seen. I once found a post-it note on the kitchen counter. Nate's handwriting. A reminder, don't forget to include Haley in the Langford slideshow. She's basically family now. No one had ever written that about me. Not even in jest. There's a cupboard in the hallway that sticks when it's humid. Inside an old scarf I wore on our first anniversary still smells faintly of fireplace smoke and cold champagne. The edge is unraveling. I haven't thrown it away. Some things tear slowly, not from violence, just from being pulled again and again in ways no one sees. People rarely say the thing that ends a marriage out loud. Sometimes it's a D. The phone was, on his side of the bed screen, still glowing. I wasn't meant to see it. The Privier read tonight. "You said it made your voice catch." I didn't touch it at first. I stood there watching it dim, then light up again. "Don't forget the bracelet." The one I wore last. He had always guarded that phone, like it held state secrets. I picked it up and tapped in Emily's birth date. The messages didn't surprise me. Not really. It wasn't the photos, not even the audio file titled Post. It was, "Let her have the spotlight." One more toast, one more dress. Then I file, and I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in my palm. My thumb pressed the power button not to close it, but to stare at the black screen. I could see my own reflection. I looked exactly the same. There was a video, too. I tapped play without thinking, Nate's voice quieter than usual. She won't see it. She never does. It's what I like about her. She keeps the peace while I build the kingdom. A silver cufflink rolled off the nightstand. I watched it settle on the carpet, spinning once before going still. The same pair I bought him 5 anniversaries ago. I remembered the note I'd written then for everything we've built together. He hadn't kept the note. The room smelled like cedar and cologne. On the dresser, an open drawer held receipts from a hotel across town, dated 3 days earlier. One of them had a lipstick stain at the bottom corner. The color didn't match anything I owned. I didn't call him. I didn't smash the phone or tear the sheets. I opened my wallet and removed the card I had kept for years, folded behind an old photograph, Thomas Beckett, Private Investigations. There was a coffee stain near the corner, a faint mark I'd never cleaned. I had never used the number, until now. I slid the phone back onto the table and tucked the card into my coat pocket. I knew what I had to say. I want the whole truth, even if it takes everything with it. I used to believe silence was something given, not chosen. The suitcase made more sound than I expected. The zipper stuck slightly near the end, tugging like it didn't want to close. Inside, 3 blouses, 2 sweaters, a pair of flats I hadn't worn in months. I didn't pack the framed photo by the dresser. There was no need to carry a version of myself that never existed. The linen closet still smelled like lavender from the sachets Susan brought last Easter. She'd handed them to me in the hallway. "Your towels always have a mildew smell," she said. Then she walked past already on her phone. I left the lavender untouched. There was a note on the fridge from Nate taped with a magnet, shaped like a wine bottle. Dinner with the Monroes postponed. Don't cancel the florist. Nothing directed at me. Nothing requiring response. I wrapped Emily's blanket and packed it into a separate bag. The one with the tiny fox embroidered in the corner. She liked to trace the tail when she couldn't fall asleep. I told Susan she'd be staying in Connecticut for a while. "You're overreacting. We're not children anymore." That's all she said. I changed every password that had my name in it. Every reminder that tied me to shared calendars. Auto-renewals, birthdays I'd memorized and never forgot. I closed each app like it was a door, with no handle on the inside. There was an envelope on Nate's desk, the kind used for corporate checks. I folded a single page into it and left it under his pen. "You once said I never draw lines. Consider this the first. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not Haley, not Shelley, not even the doorman who always greeted me by my husband's last name. Tom sent over a flash drive, plain, no label. Just a string of numbers etched faintly into the metal. I opened it, scanned through spreadsheets, email logs, transaction trails. Then I typed 5 words into a new message I've seen all I need, and hit send. There's a coat hook behind the door. One side is slightly bent. It used to catch my scarf every morning. This time I didn't look back to see if anything remained hanging. Some departures don't need noise. They just need to be complete. Freedom doesn't arrive with sound. It drips in quietly like light through a window you forgot to close. The apartment had uneven floors and chipped paint around the windows. The radiator clicked like it was clearing its throat, and the faucet leaked just enough to notice. But nothing echoed my name back, and that was enough. The mug I used had a chip on the rim. I turned it each time I drank, as if to avoid something I knew was already part of me. The tea tasted plain, almost medicinal, but it was mine. No one had brewed it for me. No one had asked what I wanted in return. I bought watercolor pans at a corner shop near the train station. The clerk didn't ask what they were for. She rang them up without looking at my face. That too felt like permission. There was a market on 6th, where they sold small glass jars of loose-leaf chamomile and linen napkins stitched by hand. I bought 2, one to use, one to fold carefully and place in the drawer next to a notebook I hadn't opened in years. A voicemail came from Susan. "You should have thought about Emily. Disruption at her age leaves marks." Then nothing. I placed the phone on the counter and watched the screen go dark. I didn't press delete. I didn't respond. I let it rest there, blank and humming. Each morning I walked the block twice before breakfast. The second lap slower, my steps quieter. I passed the same stoop with a crooked planter and a ceramic frog perched beside it. Someone had painted a gold stripe down its back. It didn't match anything. That made me stop each time. One night, I unpacked the last of my things. A small frame had cracked during the move, an old family photo fractured through the center. My face split between glass edges. I wrapped it in newspaper and dropped it gently into the bin beneath the sink. No hesitation, no glance back. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't need to. I sent her drawings and small notes with simple words, "I miss your fox stories. Did you eat all the strawberries?" She didn't write back, but I knew she read them. Kids always know when you mean something. I once believed stillness was a sign of waiting. Now, I know it can be a beginning. Some silences aren't empty. They're earned. Absence is rarely noticed until it disrupts something valuable. The voicemail began with my name drawn out like a rehearsal. "You shouldn't have walked away. The optics are poor, especially this close to the quarterly vote." No mention of where I was, no question of why I left, just a reminder of timing, as if grief could be scheduled between board meetings. An email arrived the same morning. Polished. Branded. Haley's name sat beside the Whitlow Holdings letterhead, like it had always been there. "Your departure is creating gaps in public-facing continuity. Would you consider attending the foundation dinner, just to maintain unity?" I stared at the subject line for a long time. Request for presence. Not presence of mind, not presence of care, just presence. Susan called that evening. Her tone was clipped like folding sharp corners into a napkin. "This isn't just about you. You married into responsibility. Don't let pride confuse your role." There was a pause before the click, the kind of silence that lands harder than words. I ran my thumb along the edge of the envelope on my desk. It held nothing but a printout of the company's last press release my name omitted. It hadn't felt like an accident. Richard Callahan asked to meet at a corner table near the plaza. He wore the same cologne my father used to wear, though fainter now. There's uncertainty at the top. Investors are asking questions. It would help if you made a statement. I folded the edge of my napkin. "A personal one," he clarified. "Something graceful." "You still carry weight, Elizabeth." The way he said it still as if I had lost mass, not memory. I nodded just enough to move the conversation forward. I listened just long enough to be polite. I let the espresso cool beside me untouched. He stood first. "I hope you'll reconsider. They weren't prepared for your absence." I walked home slowly past the florist where I once bought peonies Susan claimed were too common for formal events. I remembered the way she wrinkled her nose, placed the bouquet aside with obot comment. She never asked who they were for. The street was quiet, except for a wind that kept pulling at the edge of my coat. Some people don't miss you when you're gone. They miss the function you served. And that's not the same thing. There's a difference between being invisible and choosing not to be seen. I took on small projects, quiet work, the kind no one clapped for, but that kept the lights on in places that needed light. A literacy grant for a shelter, a funding guide for a women's clinic near Albany. No plaques, no stage lights, just spreadsheets and sincerity. Nate once looked over my shoulder while I was drafting a proposal like that. "You went to Wharton for this." Then he walked out before I could answer. I started baking. Not well, but with steadiness. I burned the first batch of almond scones. The second came out better. I didn't throw away the first. I ate them slowly, one at a time, as if proof that something imperfect could still be kept. The herb pots on the balcony leaned sideways in the wind. I clipped mint in the mornings, kept the stems in a glass near the sink. The leaves bruised easily, so I learned to handle them softly. At a conference on non-profit sustainability, I stood in the back of the room. Haley was on stage, polished and camera-ready. She gestured to a slide with Nate's name under legacy donors. A man leaned toward the woman beside him. "That's not his wife anymore, right?" The woman didn't look over. "No, that's the real her." I didn't flinch. "There's a painting in my living room now. I found it at a flea market in Hell's Kitchen, tucked behind crates of glassware. A woman walking alone in an open field skirt, caught mid-turn. No signature, no title, just motion unfinished and unapologetic. Emily saw it during her last weekend visit. She stood in front of it a long time, one hand curled around her toy fox. "Is that you, Mommy?" I didn't correct her. "Maybe," I said. "There's a cardigan I wear that still smells faintly of flower and citrus. The sleeve cuffs are stretched from habit. I mend them sometimes, not to preserve the shape, but because I like the way it feels to keep something going quietly. I once believed survival meant blending in. Now I know it means staying whole, even when no one is watching. There are fewer mirrors in my apartment than before, but the ones that remain, they finally reflect someone I recognize. Closure rarely announces itself. It waits still and precise behind ordinary things. The papers were stacked neatly on the desk, cream pages firm, stock, nothing rushed. The pen beside them was silver, the kind given to men on retirement. The ink bled slightly on the signature line, as if the paper hesitated too. Edward slid the file across the desk without comment. The room smelled faintly of tobacco and lemon polish. He glanced at the window, not at me. "This version protects your name. The rest is just formality." I read each line not for content, but rhythm. The repetition of phrases, release and discharge, full separation, no obligation. Words that carried weight only when spoken aloud by someone who once looked you in the eye and promised permanence. I signed. The pen left a faint smudge on my thumb. I wiped it on the inside of my sleeve without thinking. It left a mark I didn't try to remove. There was a ring box in my bag. Black velvet softened at the corners. I opened it once more. The ring sat where it always had, tilted slightly to the left from years of habit. I placed it inside, closed the lid, and sealed it with a single note folded in thirds. "This isn't revenge. This is release." A clerk asked how I wanted my name recorded. I gave her the answer without pause. Elizabeth Whitlow. She blinked once typed and never looked up again. On the drive home, I took a different route. Not shorter, not longer, just unfamiliar. The kind of road you take when you don't need landmarks anymore. Outside the old house, the garden had grown wild. The shutters were closed, one slightly askew. I parked half a block away and walked the rest. The key was still on my ring. I ran my thumb over its edge, then dropped it into the mailbox without a sound. A car passed slowly behind me. The wind shifted. My coat lifted slightly at the hem. Back in the driver's seat, I turned on the radio. A piece of music I hadn't heard in years, played through Brahms, I think. I didn't change the station. The glove compartment still held an old receipt from our 2nd anniversary. The ink had faded to a pale blue. I folded it, placed it under the mat, and let the music continue. Some endings are not meant to echo. They only need to hold. The water took longer to boil today. Or maybe I just noticed it for the first time. I placed 2 chamomile bags in the ceramic pot I found at a street fair last fall, its glaze chipped on one side, but still holding warmth. Light spilled through the slats in the blinds, soft and uneven. The dust didn't bother me anymore. Emily's drawing leaned against the windowsill, bold purple strokes, 2 small figures in a field of tall grass. I hadn't asked what it meant. She had told me anyway. That's us. You're smiling. I had written 3 lines this morning. Nothing profound, just a note to the non-profit team offering to lead the next skills session. No charge, no conditions. I ended it with, I still believe in quiet women doing loud things. On the table, my draft manuscript rested beneath a coaster stained with weak coffee. I hadn't touched it in 2 weeks, but I didn't feel late. The title still held Being Whole Without Permission. Footsteps padded across the floor. Mom. I'm hungry. Hair tangled, stuffed fox in one hand, unmatched socks. I didn't hesitate. Let's make pancakes. The mixing bowl had a chip in the rim. Emily insisted on pouring the batter herself. Most of it landed in the pan. The rest we left where it fell. After breakfast, she held up a new drawing. Can I hang this one? 2 figures again, but closer this time. Their hands overlapped in bright orange, I nodded. No frame, no straight lines, just tape crooked on the wall. She skipped away, humming. I stepped out onto the balcony, the chipped cup cooling between my palms. Below a delivery truck reversed with a soft beep. Somewhere a door slammed. The city stirred. I closed my eyes, not from exhaustion, just to feel the air. I didn't replay old words. I didn't count the names never spoken. I didn't need to. Not anymore. I had called my own name, and that was enough. It was